Well, hello, I'm Janet Morana, Executive Director of Priests for Life, co-founder of the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. So many of us have heard like February is Black History Month, and March, Women in History Month, and of course, October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, November, National Adoption Month. And, because of the work I do with Silent No More Awareness Campaign and Rachel's Vineyard and so many of abortion recovery programs, we feel there's a need with so many people that we know are out there hurting after their abortion experience, meaning the mom, the dad, the grandparents, future siblings, a whole family unit. They're hurting. And it's a shame that they don't realize that there's abortion recovery programs available to them. So we're here to introduce you to the fact that April is Abortion Recovery Awareness Month. And my hope and prayer is that one day this could be as known out there throughout our country and throughout the whole world like breast cancer awareness is, because in fact, there are more men, women, and family members hurting from abortion than people who are hurting from breast cancer. Now, I'm not minimizing breast cancer. It's tragic. I have members of my own family have suffered from breast cancer, but we also know the suffering and silence that is created around abortion. And we're here today to delve into that topic. And joining me is, of course, a dear friend of mine in our ministry, is Georgette Forney. She is president of Anglicans for Life, but she also co-founded the Silent No More Awareness Campaign with me, where the women, men, and family members are speaking out publicly for their regret and hope that we can bring others into healing. So here we are. Georgette, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you. Great to be with you all.
And as you know, Georgette, like I said, it is on our hearts, isn't it, to spread the abortion recovery awareness. We just want to pump that up so that people realize this is not the unforgivable sin. We're here for you. There's so many ministries all across our nation and around the world that are bringing help. And isn't it sad that how many people just don't know about it?
Well, it's part of it is that they don't know about it. I mean, there was a recent study done by one of our colleagues at Support After Abortion that found 9 in 10 people do not know abortion recovery programs exist. But it doesn't surprise me from the standpoint of our culture, in that everybody wants to whitewash abortion like it's a non-event. But I think it's important for us as leaders in the movement, but also for your viewers to understand the trauma that happens during an abortion procedure. As you know, I had an abortion when I was 16 years old. And I mean, I can still remember the feeling of my legs going up in those stirrups and that sense of being so vulnerable and being violated. And well, I appreciate that more and more abortions are being done through chemical, but the trauma of the death of your child, the trauma of the experience of having a vacuum suck out your child from your woman's body parts, or dropping it into the toilet through chemical abortion, it creates such a mark on the soul of each woman that it's almost like she's in shock and doesn't even appreciate the trauma that her body has gone through, her psyche has gone through, and why we must be talking about it. But you have to remember, the abortion industry does not want women acknowledging the trauma, the grief, the pain, because then it proves the point that their product is actually very dangerous for women. Their healthcare provision is dangerous for the mind and spirit and personhood of every woman, let alone what it does to the fact that we kill our children in the process. So we have got to get the word out that help is available, and we have to fight the fact that the news media is trying to ignore it.
Right.
I
Well, of
got
course, they're couching it, Georgette, as healthcare, like it's, all fuzzy and wonderful. So, could you, for our people, take us back? You said
mm,
you had your abortion when you were 16, right? But then
right.
it took a very, very long time, didn't it? So you sought healing. Talk about a little bit when you were a teenager and then
Mhm.
how you felt immediately thereafter, because I think so many people might be listening and say, yeah, I know, someone who had an abortion, and it just seems like they haven't been right about it, but I can't seem to talk to about it. I can't seem to get them to healing. So in your case, you went through a long period of time from abortion to recovery, right? So
Yeah,
give
it was,
us a little bit of a
yeah,
snapshot of that. Yeah.
okay. It was 19 years. I was 16 years old when I had my abortion. And I remember I had made plans to go after my abortion was done, and it was done in Detroit. And my sister lived across the river in Windsor, and so I drove to her house, and I got to her house, and I remember I was relieved. I was so glad my problem was gone, but I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop sobbing. And it was about 7 o'clock by the time I got there. And I remember crawling into bed and just kind of pulling myself into the fetal position and falling asleep. And I woke up in the morning, and I was so sad, but yet I was so relieved. And as a 16-year-old, you're not really capable of understanding everything that's going on. And
Mhm.
and I remember thinking, I have to get dressed and head home. And if I don't pull it together, mom's going to know something's wrong.
Ah,
And I remember as I got dressed, I was literally, this is how the trauma is, because there's things you remember. I can still remember pulling on my pants, getting dressed, thinking, yesterday was just a bad dream. Like the whole thing was a bad dream. And I, in essence, told myself that it didn't really happen. And I
right.
believe that as a 16-year-old, it was my way of handling the trauma. And in all honesty, I went home that day and I worked very hard to be fine, put on that mask, and that everything was good. I worked really hard at school that year. I remember, being determined to change my life, clean up my act, if you will.
Hmm.
And yet there were these weird thoughts that were always in the back of my head about my abortion. Although I would never allow myself to like sit and put words to it, or really process it. It was things like, I'm never going to be able to have another baby. I remember thinking, I have to marry somebody that doesn't want children because I can't have children. Those were like the things that were back there. And
Right.
then I met my wonderful husband, who I've been married to for 42 years now. And he had older children by his first marriage, so he didn't want children. And we got married, and then we became Christians. And all of the families in the church, there were tons of kids. And I'm about 28 years old, my biological clock went off. And while I still had never addressed my abortion, I desperately wanted to now have a child. And
Right.
fortunately, we were able to get pregnant, and we had a baby girl. And, Rebecca is the delight of our lives. And she's now 34 years old. So Rebecca was growing up, and she went to kindergarten. So she was 5 and she started kindergarten. And I was having some really, really difficult physical problems. And so I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And I remember praying. The irony is, I was praying, I was reading Psalm 139. And at the beginning and the end of that psalm, which is a famous pro-life psalm, um, at the beginning and end of it, it actually is a prayer to reveal anxious thoughts.
Mm.
And so I started praying that prayer without realizing the connection to the rest of the psalm. I started praying the beginning and ending verses. And a couple of weeks later, I I had been praying, Lord, show me where the anxiety is coming, that my body has developed this ulcerative.
Right, because you're relating this to the colitis and not anything else. You're not even thinking
Right.
about your abortion
No,
right
I
now,
was just,
correct?
I was manifesting physical symptoms, and the doctor
Right,
said, you're under some sort of stress.
right,
And
right,
I'm thinking, my life is wonderful. I'm, a mother of a
right.
kindergartner, managing our home and, managing our video production business. And it was a few weeks later, after praying that prayer, that I was pulled out of my denial. You can see, I could always, in the back of my head, I knew I had an abortion. But
Mhm.
this day in my basement, I was holding my yearbook from my junior year in high school, the year I had my abortion. And something must have triggered it, trauma. I don't know how it all works. But all of a sudden, instead of the yearbook being in my arms, I felt a baby. I
Wow.
remember, I was cradling her little bum in this arm, and I was holding her shoulders here, and I could feel her. I could feel her skin. And I
Mhm.
knew this was the child I had aborted. It was like it came clear to me.
Clear to you, right.
Yeah, and that was 19 years. I mean, I did this quick calculation and I realized
Oh my
this
gosh,
baby
yeah.
would be a 19-year-old child, woman.
Right,
And that is what broke me out of my denial. I
yeah. So
immediately called a friend.
So I want people to understand because a lot of people might be listening right now and they say, wow, yeah, I have a cousin, I have a sister, I have an aunt. They all know somebody probably who's had an abortion, maybe hasn't dealt with it. And look, in your case, you went from teenager to this didn't happen, push it away, then going and saying, well, I'm going to marry someone that I don't have to worry about having kids. But then later on, you have a child. And then, so it's a journey. When you describe this as like a journey to healing, it takes time for, I mean, some people, as you know, come to healing quicker than others, but it's
Exactly.
not uncommon to hear stories like you 15, 20 years till they face the fact, I need help, right?
I often, one of the things I often think about when we talk about when does somebody finally, the denial stop, and the curtain comes down and we're able to kind of begin to, connect the dots on why our behavior isn't consistent, or why we have maybe an aversion to the OBGYN. I had an extreme aversion. Every time I would get on that table, I would start crying, but I never
Wow.
understood why. There were things about my behavior that I never understood, but they were just part of who I was. And when I faced the fact that I didn't just have an abortion, but that I aborted a child, my
Right.
child, that's when healing began. I had contacted my friend who had talked about this healing program she was going through for her abortion, and she came over and she sat with me. She gave me permission to cry. And I think that for many of us who made that decision, especially by ourselves, having somebody that can kind of say, it's really normal to
Mhm.
grieve the loss of this child now. You're
Right.
you're acknowledging something
Hmm.
that, while why you did it or what made you do it isn't the issue right now. The issue is, this is the death of a human being, and you
Right. It's
need
like
to grieve.
putting the humanity back onto your baby.
Yeah,
That
and
that
in
child
doing
existed.
that, you actually, your brain starts to almost process
Mhm.
how this thing had impacted your life. And that's why I refer to it so often as a trauma,
Right.
because the behaviors of not remembering, but yet remembering weird details, like still putting my pants on, that's an indication of trauma. And
Mhm.
so we need to appreciate that. Here's my theory that I started to begin. I started a minute ago to say, I think that the grace of God protects you from addressing many painful, traumatic events in our lives until we are in a place of grace and a place of safety in our life in other
Mhm.
areas, where we can kind of open the vault of pain
Right.
And God comes in and meets us in that pain and meets us in that place where he needs to bring his healing love and light and
Yeah.
forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I think if you have somebody that you love dearly and you know they're struggling, pray for their sense of well-being and safety so that they feel that they can go into this difficult place.
Right.
I remember every week when I was doing the healing program, the girl that ran the program, she would have to call me and kind of talk me into attending all over again because it was so painful every week to, in
Mm-hmm.
essence, pull off the scab of a pain that had not healed properly.
Right. Well, I have heard that a lot, Georgette, from people who say, oh yeah, I tried to talk to my sister to go for healing, but she said, yeah, I just don't want to go down that road. I just don't
Mhm.
want to go down that road again. Because, like you're saying, they realize to start that trip down that road is going to be painful, right?
And
But
that's why we want them to be in a safe place to do it.
Right. But can't you attest to the fact that while, like you said, she had to call you each week, make sure you're coming for the abortion recovery program. We hope we're going to see you, Georgette. But by the time you got to the end result,
It
right?
wasn't even the end. It was week 6 when she called. I said, "You don't have to call anymore. I got it. I'm coming." And
Okay.
I was starting to understand because I kept thinking, I thought I handled this. I mean, I thought that after 19 years, it
Mm-hmm.
had just kind of faded away,
Right.
but it didn't.
Settled itself. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
it was kind of like once you started bringing it up,
Right.
it was hard at first, but once you got into it, then you realized how much it had negatively impacted your life and kind of skewed how you looked at people, how you looked at how people interacted with you, how you saw yourself. I had very low self-esteem. I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think uh, I was valid as a woman having done what I had done.
Right.
So the healing programs are phenomenal because they teach you to understand the truth of what happened,
Right.
but also face all your feelings. I
Right.
remember one of the hardest ones for me was acknowledging anger because I felt that I had made the decision by myself. And so any anger had to be directed at myself. That was probably the hardest emotion to kind of work through. And it wasn't until actually I did a Rachel's Vineyard as a follow up because I knew we were, by then we had started Silent No More and I had begun promoting Rachel's Vineyard and I attended it just so I would be understood
Familiar with the
that I
program. Yeah.
understood it.
Right.
And yet that is really where the Lord used that particular situation to help me address some of the anger issues that I hadn't been able to tap into. So that's
Right.
one of the reasons why, I strongly encourage women to attend multiple programs. Our
Mm-hmm.
regional coordinators, we train
Right.
them to visit and try to experience the different programs because
Right.
our healing, and many people describe it as peeling back the layers of an onion.
Right. It's an ongoing process, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Well, I thought, Georgia, because you did mention Rachel's Vineyard, we have beautiful brochures that are available here at our online store at prolifeproducts.org. And these are great brochures. I highly recommend people to put them in a church literature rack, that they're just there for the taking. I encourage pastors and clergy to have them available for counseling. But I thought, Georgia, just for a minute, I'd like to read. Teresa Burke has put in here, maybe because some people listening might say, well, that's Georgette's experience, but what's some of the general list of how a person who's
Mhm.
hurting from an abortion might be responding? And so Teresa Burke in this brochure has put down a nice list. For example, bouts of crying, eating disorders, depression, guilt, intense grief and sadness, anger, which is what you were addressing, and rage, emotional numbness, lowered self-esteem, which is something you said, Georgette,
Mhm.
drug and alcohol abuse, flashbacks, nightmares, suicidal urges, fear of pregnancy, and you touched on that, right? You thought, I'm not going
Mhm.
to have any children. Anxiety, panic attacks, repeat abortions, difficulty with relationships, inability to forgive self or others, and fears of punishment from God. I mean, that just gives you a snapshot into
Mhm.
the whole list of what people who are hurting from abortion are currently doing to themselves. And like we said, statistically, the sad news is they don't realize about all the beautiful help that's available, right?
Yeah, and I would also, I was moving around. I was looking for these. I always keep these in my desk drawers. And this is the drop card that we use with the Silent No More Awareness campaign. On
Right.
the front of it, I always have a hard time remembering which way to go on this. Women do regret abortion, men regret lost fatherhood. But the back of the card features the websites for the campaign. And I
Right.
always tell people to share these in the ladies' bathrooms at your churches. You know,
Oh, that's a good idea.
you can put a little card holder, and you just set those up there. We've had a number of churches kind of make this a little bigger, and they put it in a picture frame. And
Right.
they even have a little note on there. Take a picture of this so you can go home and call or share with somebody you know who needs the help.
Right.
And
Well, Georgette, it like you said, it's our hope that through this whole month of April, we are just going to raise the volume up, that the
Mhm.
healing is available. They can go to abortionforgiveness.com. Again, abortionforgiveness.com. Put in your zip code there, and they'll see where's the nearest Rachel's Vineyard, Save One Bible Study, and all the other programs available. And as you know, you were the one who started the Abortion Recovery Coalition, which about how many different abortion recovery programs are we up to now in
I
that
think we're at
coalition?
about 26.
26,
Mhm.
So what I always say is, if there's no problem with abortion, why is there so much recovery going on, right? I mean,
Well,
that's,
and if you remember, one of the conversations we had with folks was to try to identify. And we know that there have been almost 1 million women and men and families that have gone through these different programs. So
right.
you're right. If there's no big deal to abortion, why are people going through healing programs? And the really cool thing, and this is something I get sometimes more than you do, Janet, because people, our office takes the calls, is they'll call back because we'll encourage them to attend the healing program, and then they'll call back after they attend it, and they'll always say things like, "It's been life changing. I
Right.
can't believe, why did I put this off? This has been so helpful," and they
Hmm.
call to thank us. And so your viewers, share this information so a
Right.
friend can call and thank you for helping set them free from the pain and shame of abortion.
That's right. And I've led and been part of the team of many Rachel's Vineyard retreats. Also, I've also done the Hope Alive counseling program with Dr.
Yeah.
Philip Nate, and it's the same experience. When the people get to the end of the program, no matter what program they've done, it's like a weight was taken
Yes.
off of their shoulders. They're now like, I always remark on like a Rachel's Vineyard retreat on a Friday, they come in, sometimes they don't even want to make eye contact with you. They're looking down, looking away, hard to connect. And by Sunday, oh my goodness, right? Their expressions on their face have changed. They're now
Yeah.
smiling. It's like a weight that they've been
Mhm.
carrying around is been lifted. And you and I both know the joy that's there. And the Lord's there, the
Yeah.
grace is always there. We're just not always reaching out for it, right?
We're afraid of it
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
One woman, she came up to me after she had gone through the program, one of the programs, and I didn't even recognize her. Her whole face, her hairstyle, everything about her had
Change.
changed dramatically. It was
Yeah.
like this woman had been like, and
Transformed.
maybe that's why I go back to the logo with the butterfly. She
Yes.
was, when I met her the first time, she was like that caterpillar in the chrysalis.
In the cocoon, yeah.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
cocoon. And then when I met her at the church a couple of months later, there was just this vivacious woman smiling. She gave me
Like
a
a
big
beautiful
hug.
butterfly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she was the butterfly then. So
That's right. Well, Georgette, thank you for joining me. And it's our prayer, as you know, that we will, of course, as always, be silent no more. And we want to make abortion unthinkable, an unthinkable choice for a woman or a man or any family member. But we want to also keep extending that hand to healing, because we know the joy of the Lord is just waiting for them. So thank you for joining me today.
Great to be with you all.
Okay. God bless. Well, brothers and sisters, now the job is yours. You've heard why we need the healing. You heard the beautiful stories from Georgette. And now we're going to count on you to spread during this whole month of April, and actually through all the whole year, but especially in this Abortion Recovery Awareness Month. We want you to take that webpage, abortionforgiveness.com. Ask your pastor to put it in the church bulletin, or if they project the bulletin information on a screen, abortionforgiveness.com. Let's shout it from the rooftops that the healing is available, and we're here for you. This is Janet Morana, co-founder of Silent No More. Join me again next time. Thank you, and God bless.